Hello, this is Ed Rothstein, Carroll County Commissioner, and you're tuned in to the Conduit Street Podcast, your go-to source for understanding how Maryland's policies impact your daily life.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Conduit Street Podcast. I'm Shantelle Malcolm-Lym here with my co-host for today, Kevin Kinnally. And today we're diving into one of the most debated and fundamental components of our democracy, the Electoral College. Kevin, I know this is a big topic. It has a lot of layers, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Shantelle, and good to be back. The Electoral College has been at the center of American democracy since the beginning, and it is still sparking fierce debate today. So let's break it down. Let's get into it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with the basics, right? What exactly is the Electoral College?
It's a great question, and it's one that's come up a lot recently as we are in election season. So the Electoral College is just the system we use to elect the president of the United States. It's made up of 538 electors, and a candidate needs at least 270 electoral votes to win. Each state has several electoral votes equal to its total representation in Congress. So even the smallest states get a minimum of 3 votes.
Okay, that makes sense. And then when we vote for the president, we're not directly voting for a candidate, correct?
Exactly. So voters are actually selecting a slate of electors pledged to their preferred candidate. These electors then cast the formal vote for president and for vice president.
I got you. And that makes sense. And hopefully our listeners are having their ooh and ah moments, just like I am in the background here. But let's take a step back to when the Electoral College was first created. I hear it's shrouded in a bit of mystery. There's some clandestine things happening. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, actually. The Electoral College was crafted during the Constitutional Convention of 1787, and it emerged from closed-door meetings of the Committee of 11 on Postponed Matters. The subcommittee had to solve the problem of how do we elect the president, and their discussions were intentionally secret. So there is a lot of secrecy to this.
But why, though? Why?
So I think the framers wanted to have candid debates without public pressure, but it also means that we don't know exactly what happened inside that room, right? So we do know that they had to balance fears of direct democracy, where populist states would dominate, against fears of giving too much power to Congress. So that was really the debate, and that's what they were trying to solve behind those closed doors.
Yeah. Fun question here. If you could be a fly on the wall in that room, would you want to be?
Yeah.
Right. So it was 100%. All
100%.
about striking balance. I get that, right?
Right. So they wanted a system that respected both the states and the people. Alexander Hamilton and James Madison were key voices here. And the result was a compromise that reflected the federal nature of the new republic.
Okay. I understand that. So let's talk about why the Electoral College is so important. What role does it play in our democracy exactly?
Yeah, so I would say the Electoral College is crucial because it safeguards state sovereignty. In our federal system, states have significant power, and this system ensures that they have a say in presidential elections. It also forces candidates to campaign across the country, not just in big cities or populous states.
Right. So it comes with some sort of criticisms, right? I mean, it's not a perfect system. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, it sounds great on paper, but I know that there are some people out there with some harsh criticisms for the Electoral College.
Oh, no doubt about it. And there are a lot of critics, and most of those critics argue that the Electoral College can produce undemocratic outcomes like it did in 2000 and 2016, when the popular vote winner actually lost the presidency. It also does make swing states disproportionately important, which isn't ideal, right? So we all have heard of the swing states, like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Those states get a lot of attention, especially in the most recent election cycle. So it does, those swing states do get a ton of attention. And so that can be a criticism that they're getting too much attention, and that's not really ideal. And that wasn't what, the intention.
I get that. And that makes sense. But since we're talking about the criticisms and the things that people have to say about the Electoral College, let's just make it real simple for our listeners. Let's break down the main pros and the cons.
Sure. So on the pro side, the Electoral College ensures representation for smaller states, and it prevents a purely urban-driven presidency. It also provides a clear outcome and promotes stability in the two-party system.
And the cons?
So I think the big one is that a candidate can win the presidency without winning the popular vote, as we talked about earlier. It also, again, skews campaign focus to the swing states and ignoring safe states where the outcome is more predictable. Some people also argue that it's outdated and it doesn't reflect modern values. So you might notice that, during the run up to this presidential election, Kamala Harris didn't have too many big fundraisers or events, or she wasn't in Maryland very often, but that's because Maryland is considered a very safe state for Democrats, right? So they don't need to allocate additional resources to Maryland. They'd rather spend those resources in the swing states, right? So that does create, sort of it puts the whole system into question. Whereas, the founders really wanted to make sure that candidates didn't do that, that they visited all the voters and that they made it across the country and heard from everyone. But this does, lend itself to those safe states like Maryland. You're not going to have a Democratic candidate for president doing a ton of events in Maryland because it's just not needed, and they'd rather spend those resources elsewhere.
I get you. That's interesting. So it's essentially a balance between preserving the original vision of the framers and adapting to today's needs. And that's really what we need to realize here. So what does the debate stand at today? Are there any serious efforts to change the Electoral College? I know you have the people on the pro side, people on the con side, but where are we really in deciding the way forward?
Yeah, so there are serious efforts to change the Electoral College and to repeal it, reform it. And one proposal is the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, of which Maryland has signed on to, where states pledge to award their electoral votes to the national popular vote winner. But this would only take effect if states totaling 270 electoral votes join. We're not there yet. Then there's also a push for a constitutional amendment, but that would be a very long and difficult process. So there are serious efforts out there. I think the most serious one is, that National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And again, Maryland has signed on to that along with a number of other states, but they haven't gotten to 270 electoral votes total, and they need that to be able to actually do anything. And again, a constitutional amendment, good luck. That's just not going to happen. So, there are efforts, but it's still not there yet. And I think it's, unlikely in the short term, in my opinion.
So what I'm hearing from you is that it sounds like change is possible, but it's super complicated.
Exactly. And, reform would require broad national consensus. And as you know, it's hard to get national consensus on anything these days. So, I think it's pretty unlikely, at least in the short term, unless something really tipped the needle in the direction of we need to reform it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I mean, that makes total sense. Kevin, you've definitely unpacked a lot for us today. The Electoral College is clearly more than just a quirky voting method. For sure, it was just like a figment of my imagination, something that just floated above my head every time someone mentioned it. And I can confidently say that I, for sure, understand more than I did a few months ago. I know that it's a core part of how we elect our leaders with roots that run deep, deep in American history. Is there anything else you want to share with us about the Electoral College before we sign off today?
No, I would say, it may be unusual for us to be talking about this. This is really a federal function, but in Maryland, counties run elections at the local level. And so it's an interesting topic. And I think, on the heels of the presidential election, there was a lot of talk about the Electoral College. And I felt like, it might be good to get this out into the world and sort of explain it a little bit. It is one of those institutions that forces us to think about the balance between democracy and federalism. So I really appreciate you diving into this topic with me, Shantelle, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you. I'm always here to listen to these political notes that you're always willing to share. It's always a pleasure. And to our listeners, I just want to say thank you for joining us on the Conduit Street Podcast. On behalf of my very educated guest, Kevin Kinnally, I'm signing off. So stay tuned for more insights into Maryland politics and governance, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.